we are going to discuss a very important topic. The title of today's discussion is Teacher as a Manager. You all know that being a teacher in your classroom or in your school, you have to perform various roles. And many of those roles are directly related to the teaching learning process. Or sometimes you play certain roles which are not directly related to the teaching learning process, but they have their importance for the growth and development of the children who are coming to your school. You have to interact with the parents, you have to interact with your peers, you have to manage things with your management, school management, or the district administration, or the local administration. So, apart from teaching learning, you have to perform many roles. That's why we say that today's teacher is not only the teacher who teaches in the classroom. Basically, teacher, whether he or she is in the classroom or outside of the classroom, he or she always manage various activities or many things. So when he performs this managerial role, in this managerial role, he become a manager. You know what a manager is? Let us think what a manager do in an industry or in any organization. What a manager do? A manager manages the resources which are required for the production, whether it is human resources or it is material resources. He may be a store manager, he may be a human resource manager, he may be a floor manager, or he may be he may be managing certain machines. So manager play various roles in which he or she manages different resources. Manager also manages the situations in any industry or in any organization. Different types of situation emerges, like there is a strike in the labor, there is some resource crunch, some machine has failed, he has to manage the production. So he has to manage the situation which he or she has never imagined earlier. So he not only manages the resources, he also manages the situation. And the third role which he plays is he takes decisions. What kind of decisions? To design something, he has to take a decision. If there are various designs, he or she has to take a decision that okay, which design is okay. If he has to allocate certain task to a group of people or to one or two persons, he has to decide which person is good for which kind of job or what kind of role. So he basically manages the situation as well as takes certain decisions, and not only take decisions, the decisions which are already taken by the management of the organization or the industry, he or she has to implement those decisions. So a manager in a factory manages resources, manage situations, take decisions, and manage the implementation of the decision which is already taken. Now, transform these roles and compare these roles with your roles as a teacher. Why I am saying teacher is a manager? You are also a manager because you manage your classroom. You manage the teaching learning resources. So when I am saying that you are managing your classroom, let's see, in a class there are different kind of learners. Some are good learners, some are average learners, some are slow learners. Sometime if it is a diverse classroom, there may be the learners with some difficulties or some challenges. They may be physically challenged, they may be mentally challenged, or any other difficulty. So you have to place them at appropriate position in the classroom where they will sit, what they will do, what kind of activity you will design. And to help each and every learner in learning, you also manages the resources. like a resource manager does in a industry, you also manage resources. These may be teaching learning resources, classroom resources, whether it is sitting arrangement or some chart or model arrangement or some material you required for the demonstration. So you manage those resources like a manager. Like a manager coordinate with the management of the industry, you also coordinate with different stakeholders. You coordinate with the parents. You coordinate with your peers, means the fellow teachers. You coordinate with the learner itself, and also you coordinate with your school management. So different kind of coordination activity you have to do when you are performing your role as a manager in the school. And also you manages activities. What kind of activity you manage? You decide whether today I will discuss something or there will be some demonstration. If learners are to be involved, whether whole class is to be involved, or you will frame certain groups. If you frame certain groups, whether those groups will be large groups of 10 students in one group, or those groups will be small groups like 3 students group, 4 students group, or 5 students group. So, if you compare your role in a classroom with the role of a manager in an industry or in a factory, you will find that you also a manager. You are also a manager. Because your role is not less than a manager of an industry or a factory. So when you think that what kind of role I have to play in a school as a manager, you can categorize your role in 3 ways. Your role as a manager in pre-teaching phase means the phase where you are planning to teach. Where you are planning to teach. You are not actually in the classroom. Then your role as a manager in the classroom means the teaching phase. And your role after the classroom means when teaching is over. You are planning for the next lecture, for the next class, means the post-teaching phase. So teacher plays a role of a manager in pre-teaching phase, in teaching phase, as well as in post-teaching phase. Let us discuss these roles one by one. That what is the role of a teacher in pre-teaching phase, what is the role of a teacher in teaching phase, and what is the role of a teacher in post-teaching phase. If you think that what you do before going to the classroom, if you have to teach a class, what you do? The first thing you do, you analyze the content. What content you will teach? What kind of that content will be? From where that content will emerge? Whether you will take the content from your textbook, or you will refer some other books, or you will utilize some magazines or newspaper articles, or the content which is available with the learner at home. So you decide not only about what will be the content, you also take a decision that what will be the resource of the content, whether this content is appropriate to the learner or not. When I talk about the appropriateness, appropriate in terms of the learner's mental ability, appropriateness in terms of the learning objectives which you will decide, appropriateness in terms of the language. Suppose you decide that okay, you will discuss on a social issue today, and you take a newspaper article from a famous English daily which is coming at your home. That issue is important. But if your class is not able to read the article, means the language competency of that class is less, it is a smaller class, then you cannot utilize that article in your classroom. You have to find out an alternative solution. Either you take the similar kind of a chapter from your textbook. If it is not available, then you should write it into the language which is easily understandable by your learners. So in this way, you manage the content. The second thing which you do in the pre-teaching phase, you decide the instructional objectives. What are the instructional objectives? What will be the expected outcomes? What is expected from the learners after completion of your class or going through this content? Whether they will understand something, whether they will analyze something, whether they will evaluate something, whether they will solve any problem, what kind of objects? Because every content has a different kind of objective. If it is a theoretical content, the objective will be different. If it will be a mathematics or some skill related content, your objectives will be different. So instructional objectives depend upon the nature of content which you have planned. So the second thing which you manage along with the content is the instructional objective, and both things you manage before going into the classroom. And also you examine the suitability of learning experiences, means what kind of learning experiences you want to give to your learners, whether those learning experiences are according to the abilities of your learner, according to the competencies of your learners, and also matching with the instructional objectives which you planned, designed and set. So all these things are connected to each other and you manage each and everything. The fourth dimension in the pre-teaching phase is you identify the best way to provide the learning experiences. What will be the best way to provide the learning experience which you have decided? Whether a discussion will be better or a outdoor trip will be better, whether I should organize a quiz or I should bring some material, give it to the learner, let learners experience it on their own and then you discuss with them, or you play some games with them. So what kind of learning experiences you will design, how you will impart those learning experiences, what will be the best way? It depends upon the nature of the content as well as the learning objectives which you have decided. If your learning objectives are only for the understanding purpose, your way of giving the learning experience will be different. If you are going for analytical objective or you want that they should solve a problem, then the nature of your learning experience will change according to the objective for the similar kind of content. So what will be the best way to impart the content or to provide the learning experiences? It depends upon the nature of the content, the instructional objective which you have decided, and the resources which are available there. So the next very important thing is the resource. For providing that particular learning experience which you have decided, like you have decided, okay, I will give certain material today to the students and students will do certain activities with that material. So you have to manage the material. What kind of material will be? In what amount the material will be required? So you not only manage the learning experiences, you manage the resources like a resource manager. I have already told you. And also you plan the evaluation process or the assessment techniques. How you will evaluate, whether it will be a formal evaluation or informal assessment in the classroom, whether it will be a test or it will be some quiz, whether it will be a written test or a demonstration activity or some discussion, whether you will give some paper pencil activity or you will just give them an activity and observe what they are doing. So in this way you decide that how you will go in your classroom. So before entering the classroom, you manages different things. Like you manages the content, you decide about the content, you decide about the learning experiences, you decide about the instructional objectives, you decide about the way through which you will impart your teaching learning experiences, you decide about the evaluation technique, and also you decide about the resources which you will use. All this planning, all this management you do before entering in your classroom. That's why we call it teacher as a manager in pre-teaching phase. This is pre-teaching phase. Let us move towards the teaching phase. Teaching phase means when you enter in your classroom, you are interacting with your learner. At that time, what you will do? When you enter in your classroom, what you do? You first analyze the situation. Like you remember the role of a manager in the industry? You also analyze the situation. You also analyze the situation. What kind of situation is this? When you think, where are your learners? Are they ready to learn or not? If they are not ready to learn, you do something to make them ready to learn. Are they interactive with you? If they are not interacting with you, you plan certain activities, you ask certain questions so that they start to interact with you. So you analyze the whole situation of the classroom when you enter in your class. So like a manager in the industry, you also here do the situation analysis. Then you analyze the learner's interest. Whether your learners are ready to learn, are they interested to learn or not? I still remember example which I often quoted that quotes that a teacher entered into a classroom. The classroom was a history classroom. But when she entered in her classroom, what she saw on the board that students have removed H and I from the history. And they wrote on the board subject, HI is missing, story. The teacher entered in the classroom. She realized, okay, my students are more interested in a story. So she used story as a technique to teach history. So that because students were interested in the story. You have to analyze in what types of activities your learners participate with more interest. You should organize that kind of activities in your classroom. Because your duty is to make your teaching learning interesting. If your teaching learning is not interesting, your learner will not be ready to learn and they will not learn. To make them ready to learn, make your teaching learning interesting. So, how you will make your teaching learning interesting? You make teaching learning interesting through various activities. The activities which you plan in the classroom, like you can organize some small group activities, you can organize some activities like role play, you can give some quiz, you can give some puzzles. It depends upon the nature of the content and the subject which you are teaching in your classroom. But you make your teaching learning interesting by different kind of activities. And sometimes what happened with a teacher, when a teacher enters into a classroom, he or she has already planned something. He or she has planned some activity. He or she has planned some content. The moment he or she enters into a classroom, he or she feels that the class is not ready to learn with the method which I have decided. You might have faced this situation in your class also. That you have planned something. You planned a particular way, a sequence of the content. The moment you enter into the classroom, you interact with your learners, you find that they are not ready to go through with your planning. So you have to deviate from your planning. You have to deviate from your planning if your planning is not working. If you have planned a certain way and your planning is not working, the solution is not that okay, you leave the class and you will teach into the next class. No. You should have alternative with you. You should have planned some alternative with you before even going to the class. So sometimes within the class, you have to deviate from your fixed plan. And you have to manage as well as encourage the interactions. This is a very important point. For example, you enter in your classroom and you have to ask certain questions. How will you ask the questions? One teacher may ask questions to only 2 or 3 students of the class. The students may be favorite to him or her, or the students who are more vocal, more responsive. Teachers prefer to ask the questions to those students who are more vocal or more responsive. Is it a good management? No. As a teacher, if you are in the class, you have to ask questions to the students sitting at every corner of your class. You have to distribute the questions in your classroom in such a way that the students from the last row and the students from the first row have equal opportunity to respond to your question. In this way, you can make your class interactive and you can ask your learners, your each and every learner, to participate. These are few ways through which you can manage your classroom in teaching phase. The third dimension of your role as a teacher, manager in the classroom is manager in post-teaching phase. When we talk about manager in post-teaching phase, what you have to do? Because your teaching is over. Now you have to analyze the learning outcomes. What was expected to be learned and what your learners have already learned. Is there any learning gap? You have to identify that learning gap also. And you have to plan that what support you will provide. You should reflect on your own teaching learning after your class. What were your objectives? What was your method? And what method you have adopted? If you deviated, what were the reasons due to which you deviated from your plan? Whether your learners were happy in your class? Whether your learners were ready to learn in your class? What they have learned? How much they have learned? If something is missing or if something is to be substantiated, what will be the base to substantiate that? You also identify the further needs of the learner. That what learner needs more. You can facilitate with some alternative ways. Like, okay, for example, in your class, you may have certain learners who learn with your own pace. Means they learn with the pace of the teacher. Thus, they match your speed. There may be the learners who do not match your speed. All are not slow learners. Some may be slow learners, but they do not match with your speed. Or they do not understand the examples given by you. Or they are not able to define a concept in the language in which you want them to define. What are the alternative ways? Will you give them additional activities? Will you ask them to reread? Will you give them some exercise? Or you involve them in some group activities? Because sometimes, you must have find in your classroom that certain learners are not ready to ask questions to the teachers. There are few students who always ask questions. There are few students who do not ask questions so frequently. What you will do so that each and every learner, each and every student of your class ask a question to you? You can give them a slip in the starting of your class. That, okay, every student should write a question on this slip which he or she want to ask. And you can collect the slip. So if a learner is hesitant, in asking a question to you, but he can write the question, she can write the question, and you answer that question. So that you can distribute the questions in the whole class. So you facilitate with alternative ways actually. And with the learning experiences which you have learned as a teacher in your classroom, you modify your teaching learning for the next class. You modify your teaching method, you modify your learning resource, you modify your way of interaction, you can take content from some other resources, or you can design some other activities. So, when you are a teacher, manager in a classroom, you are not a manager of the classroom situations, you are a manager of various activities before the classroom as well as after the classroom. So in summary, we can say that a teacher has to perform a role of a manager in different phases. Like in pre-teaching phase, you have to plan your teaching learning, your instructional system. I have already told you what you plan. You plan about the content, not only the amount of the content, but also the nature and language of the content. Then you plan about the instructional objectives. Then you plan about the learning situations, the learning experiences. Then you decide the way through which you want to impart the learning experiences. You also plan and manage the learning resources. and you also plan and manage the assessment. So all these comes under the first phase, that is the teacher as a manager in pre-teaching phase. And when we talk about the teacher as a manager in teaching phase, you actually manages the whole classroom. You manages the sitting arrangement of the learners in your classroom. You manages the interaction with the learner in the classroom. You encourage them. You develop their interest. You modify your teaching method sometimes. I have already told you. You utilize the resources in best possible way so that each and every learner can be able to get the benefit of the resource which you are using in your classroom. So all this come under your role as a manager in teaching phase. And in post teaching phase, I already told you, you analyze the result, whether learning outcomes have been achieved or not. You reflect on your own practices, your own observations, you improve them, you modify them, and you become a better teacher for the next class. So your role as a manager in a classroom teaching learning is a continuous process. You keep on improving, you keep on managing things. Hope that today's discussion will help you to manage your teaching learning more effectively in your classroom in future. And if you will go through all the points which I have discussed, you will definitely learn some good ways to manage your classroom, and you will become an effective classroom manager. Thank you for your patient listening.